I want to welcome everybody today to our Lunch and Learn. It's glad to be back. I hope everybody had a good summer and enjoyed it. Now we got to get back together and pay for those vacation bills and everything else that's out there. So we want to talk about a way maybe to help you broach the subject to your clients about what they're going to do with retirement. We're always told that defer, defer, defer. You always want to defer income to as far out as possible. Well, that may be true for many people, but it's not true for everybody. And the purpose of this is to talk about those situations where deferring may not be the right answer. We'll talk about who you need to be talking to, and hopefully this will be thought-provoking to make you realize that deferral is not, again, for everybody. So with that, let's get started. And what I've got here is the tax pyramid. I'm sure everybody's seen that. The lowest tax bracket is 10% for those that are married making more than $22,000 a year. I'm sorry if any of you are out there in that 10% tax bracket. That's not enough money to earn a living today. And as we go up, the highest bracket is 37% for those making about $700,000 if they're married. If you go back, though, a majority of your customers are going to fall between the 22 and 24% tax bracket. That's having taxable income of $89,000 up to $364,000. If they're individuals, it's about half of that. Okay, so the majority of people are in here, but we'll talk about them in a minute, but you also have these people that are large income earners that are typically business owners, and they're going to be making a lot of money regardless of whether they're 50 or 70 or 75, and they probably will continue in their business. And that's really the ones we probably want to talk about most here. Now, let's look at what the marginal income tax rates have done in the U.S. over time. Well, back when it started in 1914, I think was the first tax year, the highest marginal rate was almost 80%. And it fluctuated. You can see up and down. It reached its peak after the end of World War II at 94%. It continued on along. And when Mr. Reagan was elected president, the highest marginal tax bracket was 69%. Since that time, in that 8-year reign or 8-year presidency, it reduced the highest marginal tax bracket to the 25% range. And since 92, which was when Clinton took office, it's been about 35 to 38%. But even if you look historically, today's tax brackets for those high wage income earners is probably as low as it's been in history. Okay, is lower than past years. And one of the big things about tax deferral is you always want to defer in the high income tax brackets and pay it in lower income tax brackets. That gives you some leverage. Question is, are you going to be in a lower income tax bracket when you reach retirement? Certainly there are people will be, but there are others that will not be. Now, we also look at the state income tax, because this also comes into play when you're looking at what your tax rates are going to be at retirement age, because many people go to Florida to retire. If they went from Alabama or Georgia to Florida, they're going to save 6% on their taxes when they retire. That is a reason to defer. However, if someone, and I don't want to get into politics, if someone is crazy enough to go from Florida to California, they just raise their taxes by 13%. I don't think you see many people moving that direction to pay those higher tax rates. Now, so we're not really going to talk much about individual state income tax, but it's just remember, It is in addition to that highest marginal tax bracket that we saw earlier. Now, here is the U.S. debt clock. And I apologize for this screen. It's very busy, but I want to call your attention to the up here to the upper left, the U.S. national debt, $33.1 trillion, $33,110,000,000,000. That was as of yesterday afternoon when we looked at it. It's been less than 24 hours, and the national debt is now $33,113,000,000,000. It's gone up $3 billion in less than 24 hours. Now, so I didn't want to talk politics, but there's nobody that we see in Washington willing to say it's time to stop spending or raise taxes. Why? Because they want to get reelected. If they brought that up, they wouldn't get reelected. So I don't know when or if or how taxes are going to go up, but somehow we'll have to wind up paying that national debt. The other thing is, look at Social Security. If you go down and you look right here about what the spend is, Medicare and Medicaid's $1.6 trillion. Social Security is $1.3 trillion. That's almost $3 trillion we're spending on Medicare and Social Security. And the revenue is not that much. So again, who's going to have the courage to stand up in Congress and say, we've got to either raise the retirement age or raise the Social Security tax rate or do away with the income limit on Social Security? Again, these are hard things for elected representatives to do. None of them want to do it because they know it's their death bell if they're going to try to get reelected. But my question to you is, how many of you think that tax brackets are going to be lower in the future? Personally, I don't. But that's why we're here talking about why it's not good to defer. Now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you a new screen. And if we look at this, this is what we've always been told about tax deferral, okay? This is where we start at 37% until age 70, and then it reduces to 24% at that when you retire, assuming retirement age is 70. Now, assume that the crediting rate on your funds was 6%, and that's going to be the same whether it's Plan 1 or Plan 2. Those have to be fair to me. They have to be equal, because if you change what you can earn on one plan, it's going to certainly bias the numbers toward that type plan. Now, I also tell people that when they are in the process of making financial decisions, there are two decisions that need to be made. The first that you are looking at here is the mathematical decision. We can sit and model anything and come to a mathematical decision of what is the best plan. However, the second part of that is the psychological side of making that decision. Sometimes what the person wants to do psychologically does not line up with what is the best for them mathematically. They may logically think that, yes, tax rates are going to go up, but they've heard the media saying defer, defer, defer so long that it is now ingrained, and they do not ever stop and think if that is in fact the best thing for them. So you have to stop and think. People will tell you no just because they're not psychologically prepared to accept the math standing behind the decisions. But if we use the same 6% rate, Plan 1 is actually a qualified plan. We're using the maximum amount that you can contribute in a year, which is $22,500 until they're age 50, and then they can go to $30,000. So that's the maximum contribution into a 401k. You say, well, if you're using that 6%, you got to think there's some expenses probably in an outsider plan too. Yeah, but you're not thinking about the expenses in the 401k. That's why I contend that using the same crediting rate, which is a net rate, is the best way to compare these two ideas. Now, so if they make these contributions as you see it in column C here, okay, does everybody see that? Then I said, okay, we're going to have to start taking RMDs at age 72. That RMD based on this at 6% interest is $63,000. It goes up by 79, it's $97,000. So it continues to increase because is everybody familiar with RMD? It's required minimum distribution. There's a table out there that talks about how much they have to get out of their retirement plans. Now, if we take the tax rate and apply it, that $63,000 after taxes is only $44,000. At 79, that 97 becomes 68. But they've still got $2 million in their account value. As is the case with most of these accounts, the account values will grow until about age 80 or 85, and then they'll start declining because the RMD usually becomes greater than the interest being credited. That's typical of these qualified plans. Now, if we take that same $22,000 that we were contributing earlier and we go ahead and pay the taxes, that only leaves $13,050 on an after-tax basis. If you put that aside and take out the same amount of money right here, you're going to have less money to your heirs when you pass away at age 90. So if you look at the qualified plan or plan one, and the age of death is age 90, after they get the 1.9 million, which is left in their account value, and when they pay taxes, they only get 1.4 million for their beneficiaries. If you went ahead and paid the taxes on an after-tax basis, those beneficiaries only receive $733,000. So they would receive 91% more at the death at age 90 if they did the qualified plan. This is what we've always been told. That's why we say defer, defer, defer. But let me say, this is only one scenario. This is assuming that you are having a reduced income tax bracket out at age 70. Okay. Now, let's talk about that for a second, because write these numbers down. Right now, it's $63,000. That's the income off of the retirement plan at age 72. Now, let's go back to this and look. If you got $63,000 of income and you get Social Security, so let's say Social Security is another $3,000 a month, now you're back to the 22% income tax bracket just from that. That doesn't count any other investments you might have. If you still have earned income or anything, you've got enough money to already kick you up into that 22% tax bracket. That's if you're married. Look at it if you're single. Now, if you're single, you're up in the 24% tax bracket. And those are today's tax brackets. Do you think those are going to increase over time? I think there'll be higher tax brackets in the future. But again, Social Security and your retirement income are already going to kick you up in this category. People that think they're going to be down here at 10 and 12%, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So let's go back and see what happens if we assume now, under the same scenario, they put in the same amount of money, But now, instead of having a reduction in taxes, it starts at a 37% tax bracket. And over a period of 15 years, it increases to 50%. And I did that in 3% increments, I think it was, to get there. We could look at that. But now you're still going to get your $63,000 in the qualified plan because that hasn't changed any. The difference is now, previously, where you had $44,000 of after-tax income, you now only have $28,000 of taxable income. And you say, well, that's more than 50% of the amount of withdrawal. Well, you got to remember state income taxes. So I put in there a 5% state income tax. So you're only getting out $28,000 after-tax money of all this that you put in. If you go out there and you take that and you assume death occurs at age 90, now the beneficiaries only receive $887,000 rather than that $1.4 million they got previously. So that is the new assumptions with an increasing tax bracket. The plan 2, the same thing, take the same amount of money again in this column. Now, at death, assuming death occurs at age 90, beneficiaries receive $1.2 million. Okay, versus the $887,000. Now, what happens if the interest rates are 8%? I'll show you that, instead of 6%. Now you get $2.5 million versus $1.7 million. So interest rates will make some difference. It'll make this difference larger, but it won't switch the difference around. Okay, does everybody understand that? We'll go back to 6%, because that's what I did everything at. I don't think today that our clients would think of us very favorably if we tried to tell them we were going to get them 8% interest for the next 30 years. If they did, I think I'd probably sign up for that myself. But this just shows you what effect that increasing tax bracket has, because now what you're doing is you're avoiding taxes up in the early years at 45%, but you're only paying 24% when you get out in the later years. Okay, and that is still taking the RMD. Hadn't changed anything. So what if you say the client says, I'm not really worried about the RMD. This is the amount of money that I need to live on the rest of my life, and I want to start taking a level income today. Okay, we'll look at that. In this scenario, we still have the increasing tax brackets. And I calculate if death occurred at age 90 and you're earning 6% on your money, as you can see, when they get to be age 90, they basically run out of money. That allows them to take $146,000 a year, and the tax is now would be $65,000, or I'm sorry, the after-tax amount is $65,700. Just this amount, and we go back to the other screen, to the pyramid of tax rates, $146,000. I'll go back to it. Hate to keep switching screens, but the $146,000 almost gets you to the 24% tax bracket if you're married. It almost gets you to the 32% tax bracket if you're single. So you may have some clients who have a spouse who's not in good health, and yet they're continuing to defer income, knowing the tax brackets will be higher when they're single. Again, that's probably something that we don't think about when we keep hearing defer, defer, defer. It is the same if you're still married, but if you're no longer married or have a deceased spouse, the tax brackets aren't the same. So let's go back to this, and these are the numbers. Again, remember, you have mathematical and psychological decisions. So in this way, they've used all the money. But here you still have $371,000 under Plan 2 left to the beneficiaries at death. The client may say, Ralph, John, whoever we're talking to says, I really don't care if my beneficiaries get anything or not. I want to spend every last penny before I die. I want more income from this money that I'm putting aside. So that's what we looked at here. So here is the amount, just like we did on the last page, $146,000 a year. After tax, they get $65,700. And if they do it in the plan 2, they get $76,000 a year, which represents a 16% increase over the qualified plan. Now, those are a couple of the examples. And I'm going to go back to our slideshow and talk about the other benefits of Plan 2 that we really haven't talked about. Because it's not subject to the IRS retirement contribution limits. You can give more than $22,500 into that Plan 2. We can only put in $22,500 or $30,000 if you're over 50 into a qualified plan, unless you do some other, there are other plans available, but that's a typical 401k plan. But the owner says, you know, Ralph, tell you what, I could get a 6% match if I put it in an IRA. Well, yes, you can. Or I'm sorry, in a 401k, you can do that, Bill. But guess what? That's still your money. All you then could do is put 6% more in Plan 2. It's the numbers still come out the same. The relationship, when I say the numbers come out, the relationship having more in Plan 2 is better than Plan 1, unless you really believe you're going to be in that 10 or 12% tax bracket when you get to be 65 or 70. The second thing is there's no penalty if they need the money before 59 and a half. Okay, the IRS says if you've got money in a 401k and you need money at 52, you're going to pay 10% penalty to get that money out. You can take it out of Plan 2 without a penalty. Now, it will have a effect on your final retirement income, but you can still get it. Here's, to me, is a big one, is that you're not requiring those minimum distributions at age 72. And that is where the government is going to force you to pay income taxes on this income that you've deferred. You can't defer it forever. 72, you have to start taking the income. Now, again, you've got people who are still working. Today, you know, back when they started Social Security, the average life expectancy in retirement was 3 years. Today, a full retirement is 67. Average life expectancy is in the early 80s. So now you're talking about 12 to 15 years in retirement, and people are working long beyond 72. So again, we go back to those tax rates. Are you going to be in that low tax bracket? Under Plan 2, you don't have to worry about the minimum distributions. You can time those when you want to take them and if you want to take them. And those distributions in Plan 2 are not taxed as income. So those are some other advantages that you don't see in the number side. Now, so I hope what you get from all this is that two things that we want you to go home with. Tax deferral is not for everyone. You'll position yourself as a different broker if you're talking to your client about asking them if tax deferral is the right solution for them. Because everybody's just telling them to stuff as much money as they can in their 401k and defer that income. Not necessarily the best solution. The second part that I want to get across to you is I have these spreadsheets. I develop all those. For those of you that don't know, I'm a numbers guy. We can help you model those solutions. If you give us the parameters, we can put those numbers together for you and let you look at them and help make a presentation to your client that's mathematically sound, that shows that deferral may not be their solution. Again, I'm going to go back. what we're proposing here is not the solution for everybody either. Some will want one and some will want the other. That's why they make different flavors of Coca-Cola and Sprite, why they have different flavors of alcohol, whatever you want, they're different flavors. All we want you to know is it's not all 100% deferral. So if those are the remarks that I had prepared. I think we've gone about our 30 minutes. So now I got a couple of chats. Let me see if we've got any questions. Let's see. Oh, it's talking about my politics. So anyway, but you're right. I don't think that anybody is willing to make those tough decisions, unfortunately. So, but if you have a question, take yourself off of mute or send a chat and we'll answer them for you.
Ralph, it looks like we have a question from Frank in the chat box. He says, what product are we talking about here?
Well, that's a good question, Frank. And I'm glad that I saved it to last because there are two products you can use for this. The first would be a Roth IRA or Roth 401k. That may not be available to everyone because of income limits. But the second one is just good old life insurance. But I've gotten your interest. I haven't many times we lead with the term life insurance. And guess what our clients hear? They hear life insurance. And what happens then? Half of them shut down. Okay. And
well, the reason I asked the question was I was thinking that this was, I might have misunderstood, but I was thinking this was like a long-term care seminar. So I was thinking it was maybe a life product with LTC or something of that nature.
No, but that is another good point that these life products do have long-term care benefits associated with them that you can add. But no, it is, you could either use an indexed UL, a VUL, or actually a whole life product. I tend to like more of the variable, the index product myself, just because those seem to go with the marketplace. Even though I think we had a session maybe earlier in the year about the advantages of having whole life products that are not correlated to the market as a part of your retirement plan. So that would be a reason for whole life. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said a few minutes ago. All the different flavors to solve these problems. What we've got to do is ask the right questions and be able to present it in a way that we think will be received the best by our clients. And I got a question. Any of the numbers adjusted for inflation? Tax brackets will change with inflation. You are correct. And no, they're not adjusted for inflation. I'm using that as a snapshot as today because really I don't know what the roadmap's going to look like as we go forward. I'm just saying if it was static, what it would look like. But again, if we really wanted to look at that, we could model that for inflation. I just think that's a little bit beyond the scope of the spreadsheet that I showed earlier. Thank you for that question. Any more questions? If you have some that you want to ask, please feel free to forward them to David. That's D Moreland, MORELAND, at brokerhouseins.com. That's D Moreland at brokerhouseins.com. Or you can send them to Todd Wachtel, which is TWACHTEL at brokerhouseins.com. TWACHTEL at Brokerhouse, or you can send those to me, Ardmore at brokerhouseins.com, and we'll get back to you with those responses. I hope this is something that was a little bit thought provoking to you, that so that you now just don't think defer is the answer for everybody's problem. Thank you for being a part of our Lunch and Learn today.